What is good, everyone? Pokey Oakley here. We are doing our first kind of tech talk, but this is going to be going into two cards that I am a huge fan of for a lot of the decks that I play, and that's Bibarel or Pidgeot. Some decks can run both, but a lot of the decks that I have been running, whether that's Chen Pao or Blastoise, can have the choice of either. And some of the more successful lists are leaning, towards the Bibarel lines, but I have been finding some success in my own of running Pidgeot. So I really wanted to go into some of the pros and cons to both engines, if you will, because I think that's commonly what is referred to in the Pokemon TCG, is these draw engines and support engines that can really help you get through your deck and find the pieces you need, whether that's through something like Bibarel that gets you just sheer volume of cards if you're able to get your hand to a low size, or if that's Pidgeot, finding that one single card that you need every single turn with that quick search ability. Now, this video isn't going to be about which you should play, just trying to put all of the information out there so you yourself can make the decision. There are other great draw support engines, whether that's through Comfy and the Lost Zone engine that allows you to use flower selecting ability that allows you to kind of see more cards. Or if you're running the Kirlia engine, which I think is another great one that allows you to kind of get set up with the Ralts and get going into the Kirlias and discard cards. If you can make use of the cards in the graveyard, Kirlia gets even stronger, which makes Gardevoir such a strong deck in the current status of things. I know that Goldango is kind of its own, archetype that is coming out with Paradox Rift that might be its own kind of draw engine itself, which is really, really cool to see. Some decks don't even run any of those. If you're looking at Miraidon, they don't really have one. They make use of a lot of supporter cards to really see a lot of cards in their decks, and the Miraidon and Raikou to get cards out of the deck, and the Raikou to draw cards with that fleet-footed ability. So very, very cool to see a lot of different, engines. But when I'm talking about Pidgeot and Bibarel, I think that they draw a lot of similarities in a lot of ways. Both colorless Pokemon can be splashed into many decks and really kind of give a lot of great options. So let's dive into it, pros and cons to each, and really kind of give you more information, hopefully that helps you make a decision on what fits your deck the best. We'll start off with Bibarel. Bibarel has a lot of pros. When the Bidoof is on the bench, it can't be attacked by something like Greninja or a Zapdos or something like that currently, because it has a bench protection. So you don't always have to have that Manaphy to keep it alive. So it's harder for it to be sniped down. Now, it does happen to still die to Sableye, but everything does right now, because until Jirachi is in the format, we won't be able to shut that down. So continuing onward, it is just only a stage 1. So you just need the Bidoof plus the Bibarel, and you're off and running, which can be really, really useful in not having to have extra pieces like a rare candy or a Pidgeotto to get into that final evolution and start drawing the cards that you need. Bibarel can draw up to 5 cards. If you empty your hand, you're drawing 5 cards. Another great option is when you have 2 Bibarels going, you can see a lot of cards in a turn if you still have a lot of ways to discard those cards. Makes great use of Ultra Balls and makes great use of superior energy retrievals, especially in the Chen Pao list, where you're able to take the energy from the yard after discarding some cards and then throw that energy and then use Bibarel to refill and find more of the pieces you need to close out the game. It can be really, really good. And a huge factor of why Bibarel is so strong is that it functions through Path to the Peak. Path to the Peak is a really, really difficult stadium to deal with for a lot of decks currently. So it having that ability, so if somebody Judge Path or Iono paths you or Roxanne paths you, you can function through it. You're going to be ripping through your cards anyways and trying to really dig and find those pieces after they do their hand disruption. So it can be really, really good to have that as an option going forward, and just allows you to really find your outs, which is very strong. Bibarel also has a weird synergy in some decks where it can be used with the card Skwovet. Skwovet will take your hand, put it onto the bottom of the deck, shuffle it up, draw the top card, and you end up with 1 card in your hand. And then you follow that up with a Bibarel. You can be drawing 4 to 5 cards very easily with that ability. It does take up an extra deck slot and bench slot, but can have a lot of great function as you're trying to work through the cards and find the pieces you need. Now, as we mentioned, still dies to Sableye. Both Bidoof and Bibarel get wiped out by a Sableye. So you have to really be aware of that they might be targeting it down. And 120 HP is really easy to boss up, kill with a lot of Pokemon. It doesn't take much to take out. So that's where it doesn't always work the best, but it is a one prizer. So it sometimes is okay to offer it up as a trade to make the potential prize mapping for your opponent more difficult. But with it being your draw support, it is very, very tough. So that is something to keep in mind. It doesn't have a very relevant weakness either. So you're able to kind of leave it and not worry that it's going to be taken out. But that 120 kind of defeats the purpose of it having a weakness, because most Pokemon can take that out, especially your EXs and V Pokemon are taking 120 easily. Its attack is irrelevant. It's a coin flip, takes 3 energy to get going, and that just doesn't work. So you definitely want to avoid ever having to have that be your last resort. Sometimes you have to, and you got to roll those dice. That's a lot of how the Pokemon TCG works. You do need to kind of get lucky. There are times where you are unable to thin your hand, and Bibarel just feels like it's doing nothing. So that can be sometimes in the points where you're frustrating. But hopefully in those situations, you're already ahead and you don't really need the Bibarel to do the work. So that can be very, very strong in helping you just kind of stay ahead. And whenever you do get disrupted through an Iono or a Judge or something like that, you're ready to fuel back up. So that is, it still functions great, but we want to be seeing more cards, and thinning is winning. So definitely trying to make use of that whenever we can. I mean, that kind of runs into a lot of the cons outside of maybe we'll add the 2 retreat cost on a Bibarel. If it gets stuck in the active, it can be a liability. It can slow you down and allow your opponent to catch back up into games. So you definitely need to be thinking about the deck building options. If I'm running a Bibarel, I really like going up in counts of Ultra Balls. Being able to sometimes just whiff an Ultra Ball and pitch 3 cards from my hand to see 3 new cards is really, really relevant. And I am such a fan of that as an option. I definitely have had my moments of waves between the two, but let's touch on the bird. Let's touch on Pidgey and Pidgeot and what they offer. The new Pidgeot from 151 has an attack called Call for Family. That can really help us like set up in games and really kind of allow us to stabilize by building up a bench and kind of leaving a 1 prizer in the active that we're okay with them KOing, and allows us to kind of run away with the game a little bit. So setting up our Palkias or Chenpaos or Frigidbacks, you name it, depending on the build you're running. I know it can be very prevalent in the Charizard EX deck, where you can grab a Charmander or a Pidgey or even a Manaphy. It can grab a lot of great Pokemon that allow you to kind of build up and start playing the game. That is very relevant and should not be overstated. Now it comes with the 50 HP, which means Sableye is going to be feasting on it if you do not get it evolved into that Pidgeot. So be careful with that. There is the 60 HP Pidgey, which I have been experimenting with, maybe a 1-1 of the 151 and the Obsidian Flames Pidgey. But we have to keep testing with it just to kind of give ourselves better options. So maybe the 60 HP is better to go in late, where the 50 HP is what you want to be grabbing out the gate if you need to use that Call for Family ability. So it can help get you started and set up. When Pidgeot is up and running, the free retreat, incredible. That can be an amazing way to use an escape rope, switch back into the Pidgey, retreat out, and get one of their Pokemon out that you want to be KOing. It can do a lot. You can, if they KO something, you just put the Pidgeot up, allow yourself to kind of assess the game state and move forward from there. That can be really, really helpful in not wasting energy and not wasting resources at all into getting your Pokemon where you want them to take KOs and to make sure the game swings in your favor. Now, the quick search ability is fantastic. We can't express enough how good that is. You kind of almost don't need to play cards like Luminion or an Arceus when you have a Pidgeot, because you're basically using it the same way. I often find myself using Pidgeot for supporters almost always. So if I'm running Pidgeot, I tend to lean away from a card like Luminion. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think people will differ on their builds, but that's a personal preference that I happen to like, and it has been very, very helpful. It functions in every aspect of the game. You could have a huge hand size and you just don't have the one piece you need. You just go grab it. And that's fantastic with Pidgeot. And that's the other part, is that once it's up and running, it's all gas at that point. Outside of when you see that pesky path to the peak, but it does have a relevant attack that does 120 damage for only 2 energy and allows you to kind of bump a stadium. Doesn't allow you, it does bump a stadium. So if you can get into the active, especially after you use a call for family, it already has that 1 energy on there. You can attach the second energy and start to take some sweet KOs and bumping stadiums. That, to me, is a very, very relevant part of this deck. I have used Pidgeot against a lot of single prize decks like the Lost Zone variants, even Gardevoir, to just take easy KOs and allow myself to be kind of in control while I'm in the back building up a Greninja or building up a Blastoise, or allowing my Chen Pao to stay around, or allowing me to set up that Baxcalibur. In many other ways, a lot of decks can make use of that ability. Often, if you don't expect them to use something like an Iono or something like that, you can use the quick search to grab a Lost Vacuum or to grab a Stadium, keep it in hand. So they do play the path that you immediately have that bump. So you have to really be kind of sometimes thinking ahead, understanding what your opponent might be doing, and really kind of make use of that Pidgeot to stay relevant and keep your deck going. So that can be very, very fun. Pidgeot does have a pretty relevant weakness in the current format. Miraidon, for a lot of the decks that I like to run, especially Blastoise, is already super prone to that electric weakness, so it can just be easily taken out. That is a matchup that I am still working really hard to figure out. So that weakness can be exposed, but if you can keep it on the bench and protect it and put higher threats out in front, or even set up a second one just in case that first one gets KO'd, you can stay in the match. In comparison to Bibarel, it does offer 2 prizes over 1, but that 280 HP for a lot of decks is difficult to reach. So you make use of that extra beefiness to allow for the card to stay around and do its thing. If it's drawing multiple cards, the cards you need, that's huge. Where sometimes Bibarel just whiffs, and that is never fun. Where you get your hand size down and you rip 4 cards and you just don't see the card you need. That can be very frustrating, where you're always grabbing the card you need. I have, with Pidgeot, in some of the situations, ran into it where I need an extra card. So sometimes I'm wishing my Pidgeot was a Bibarel or my Bibarel was a Pidgeot so often. But that's a part of the game, and that's why you have to deck build in sequence properly. So definitely with both of these decks, be ready to think about your sequencing, understand what cards you have left in the deck, and really make good decisions at the right times. I have often had a second thought to a play, and then I have made it difficult for me to make use of an Ultra Ball or a Superior Energy Retrieval because I pitched a card that I could have pitched to those and made use of those cards, and now I'm having to pitch more relevant cards like Boss's Orders or something very strong that can help me in the match, and I don't want to be pitching those cards when I can make use of those to help close out the game. So that is something to keep in mind. As I mentioned, Path to the Peak really shuts down Pidgeot. It doesn't do anything, and you have to load energies to bump the stadium and or randomly just rip the stadium off the top, or have it already to get yourself going. You really don't want to be in a situation where you're having to use a Palkia Rule to the Region just to get a stadium bump, and that doesn't even do it. So that can be really tough. Now, Pidgeot doesn't necessarily solve a late game Iono, Judge, or Roxanne. So you're really hoping that you're already set up and established and kind of up and running to avoid that from happening, because you're only able to grab the 1 card. Maybe it's a supporter that grabs you more cards, like grabbing a Professor's Research or even an Iono of your own, and allows you to kind of get going. So that is something that does hold Pidgeot back in comparison to Bibarel, is that in the late game, you may get blown out by those hand disruption cards. It's tough because no matter what you do in this game, there are going to be positives and negatives, and there are going to be matchups that really play into that. And that is things that you need to do as you play the game to really start to understand everything you want to see in decks and how you like to play. Because to some, the Beaver's where it's at. Play the Bibarel, see a lot of cards, and dump stuff from your hand to allow yourself to see even more cards. Can be really, really strong. But other people just want, I'm going to plan, more methodical. I'm going to grab the 1 card I need and really start to play the game with that Pidgeot. So again, this is really just trying to put more and more ideas out there for you. And you really need to be careful of your deck building when working through both of these cards. I have lowered my superior energy retrieval and even ultra ball count when I am running Pidgeot, where I'll go probably just down to like 3, maybe 2 superior energy retrievals and work in the, 2 to 3 ultra balls instead. Where in the Bibarel builds, I'm often looking to have as many of those cards that allow me to discard a lot of cards. So that can be really, really useful. Just think about that as your deck building to make use of the cards you have in your deck and really function properly. It's probably not the best play to dump your hand when running the Pidgeot because it's going to be really hard to refill that back up unless you're using an early Iono or you get some great Greninja concealed cards working for you, but you still are playing, you're still kind of playing behind and really have to rely on what you rip off your prize cards and keeping your hand size big. So make good decisions. Now with a few cards coming out with the Paradox Rift set, I think that things like Earthen Vessel are going to really help a lot of these decks function a little bit smoother because we're going to be able to pull energies out without having to rely on a Chen Pao or a Letter of Encouragement or just a normal old energy search. You're going to be able to really kind of discard a card, grab 2 energies, and really start to play the game a lot, which can be super, super valuable. I look at Blastoise as one that can make use of that super well. Discard 1 card, grab 2 energies, do 280 damage. That's really, really relevant and very strong. So that card really kind of helps us push really far up. Now, if the Chen Pao goes the Iron Hands route, that Earthen Vessel really helps in the deck building of grabbing that electric energy and a water energy to get that Iron Hands pumping to amp you very much and get after it and really put the opponent behind. Both of these decks can function with either build. I do think that Chen Pao is now leaning more towards the Bibarel. I do think that Blastoise is still being discovered. It's probably in that, lower tier, so maybe these aren't the best places to understand it, but both Bibarel and Pidgeot are finding great success in a lot of decks, whether that's Chen Pao or that's Charizard. We will probably see these 2 cards stay relevant and are great engines to work around with. So if you are deck building, consider these 2. These are great places to be and can really give your deck a lot of consistency. It comes down to what you want to play. It comes down to how you see your deck functioning. Get out and test those games, play on PTCGL, go to your League Cups, go to everything and test and play and get information from anyone out there that can really give you an idea. Maybe they see an opportunity for you to play something different. I love being able to learn from other players and understand that Pokegear is a great card to play if you don't like running the 2 prize liability in Luminion. And it's more of that I want to see, these tech cards and everything. So if you have any other cool tech card ideas or discussions, let me know in the comments below. I would really love to kind of dive into more draw engines and different types of cards. Maybe a stadium tech video I think would be very, very fun. So let me know in the comments down below. Again, I am super excited for Paradox Rift. Looking forward to the San Antonio Regional, and that's going to be my first big tournament. So it's going to be very, very fun. I personally am really, really working with this Blastoise deck. So took 2nd place at a league here in Pensacola. So I'm hoping I can continue to build on that and really get the deck fine-tuned to have a decent chance to play well. And if not, I might have to go to a more meta-relevant deck. But if we're going to go after it, we're going to get that turtle power in and see what we can do. I will continue testing with both Bibarel and Pidgeot as I go forward. Both are fantastic cards, and I hope that just putting this information out there helps you make a decision. And again, it's up to you. So hopefully those will help you build your deck in the best way and compete at the highest level or whatever level you're trying to compete at. Stay tuned for giveaways. I think we're still kind of trying to feel out what we want that to look like, but here's my first idea. And if you've stuck around this long and heard me talk enough, my first idea for our giveaway will probably be at 1,000 subscribers, and I am going to give away a full deck. I will work with the person who wins the giveaway and build a deck with them for them to have in person and play. And I think that would be super fun. It can be a rogue deck. We can do a meta deck. We can make it work. Obviously, we might not go for all the super special artworks, but we can find a way to get that deck into your hand so you can go and attack your league cups and challenges very, very soon. And that would be super, super fun. So that's my first idea. Let me know if you like that in the comments. And make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. Go check us out on Instagram and Twitter. Hit the Discord. The pod is waiting with tons of great people out there who are excited about the Pokemon TCG and all games, including disc golf. So thank you everyone for watching, and I can't wait to see you all in the next one. Cheers.